But sometimes, suffering is intelligent. When we do burn out, it's just feedback that we need to try it a different way.
Right.
So I'm all about testing things out. We don't have to judge anything, but we can test it out and see what works for us.
Welcome back, everybody, to this week's It Takes Grit podcast. I'm joined by Alyssa Nobriga, who's looking stunning today. I feel like we've totally got our outfits on match. Like we were coordinating. Thank you so much for coming into the office and on the podcast.
So happy to be here.
Yeah, this is really fun. Now, this girl makes me feel so grounded and so relaxed. And when we went to Soul Cycle, even next to her in a Soul Cycle class, I can feel your like soothing energy. It's amazing. And then we spent like 2 hours just chatting over a smoothie. And it was amazing. And I was like, I have to get this girl on my podcast. You guys have to listen to her because you're just so wise. I really look up to you. I'm like, God, she's really wise. So first of all, can you tell my audience like who you are, where you come from, and what it is that you do?
Beautiful. And I look at you and I'm like, how does she have so much energy and aliveness? And this is great. I'm like, you should definitely be sharing about that and your vibrancy. So thank you for having me here.
No, it's a pleasure.
So I am Alyssa Nobriga. I work as a soul-centered professional coach, and I am licensed as a marriage and family psychotherapist, but I've been doing leadership coaching for the last 5+ years. And so part of the work that I do is combining inner work and outer work. So how do you really move through the blocks that hold you back so that you can really step into the changes that you want to create in your life?
Yes.
So rather than just having more motivation or willpower, it's like, how do I actually get out of my own way so I can be strategic and accomplish the things that I want to do with more grace?
Yeah, absolutely. And where do you live right now? Like, what is it that your day-to-day life on helping people? How does that look for you?
So I'm in Los Angeles, and I really like the mix of online world as well as in-person deep dive events. So I tend to bring a lot of women together. I work with some men too, but I like to work with women to help them really go to their next level. There's something about women coming together where it's like, okay, she went through that, I can do that. And so bringing women together to say, whatever I'm going through is normal, and to do some of the deeper transformational work as well as be strategic and consistent. So in LA, I'll do events. I'll also do mastermind groups and online courses and things like that.
I think that's really important what you said, because a lot of times we get stuck with the online world.
Yeah.
And I feel like you can only go so far learning and reading motivational quotes.
Yeah.
Like there's only so much that you can go reading someone's Instagram, checking out their social media, but actually in person, I feel like that's when you make the biggest breakthroughs, because the events that I go to, you can't explain it because it's how you feel.
Yeah. And the community, it's up leveling. And I find that, it's great to have different cues and prompts to help go deeper on your own. But when you're in community and you actually have an immersions are one of the best ways to create change. So having a 2-day, a deep dive where you actually get to unplug from some of the normal chaos, really dive in and get free of whatever's been holding you back mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, helps you actually really align.
And you talk a lot about getting out of your own way.
Yeah.
Like that's so easily said. You're like, just get out of your own way. But like, how do you get to a point, do you feel, when it's like enough is enough?
Yes.
And how do you know that you are in your own way?
Yeah, that's a good question. So oftentimes when people have a recurring pattern that they're hitting up against, so for your community, maybe they're trying to get consistent with their workout routine, or they're wanting to stay with the diet that they're sticking with, but they're not doing it. Oftentimes there's an unconscious block getting in the way. So I'll call this a competing intention, where you've got one intention to be consistent with your workouts and another intention that's pulling you in another direction. So you're at war inside of yourself. And so one question you can ask yourself, if you've been trying to create a change and you're not able to do it, you've been hitting up against the same block, one thing to ask yourself is, one fear I have of letting this block go is, and then so I'll ground it a little bit. I had a woman come see me and she wanted to lose weight. And she's like, I'm getting up at 4 a.m. She had all the willpower, motivation, and discipline, but then she would fall off, right? Like this yo-yo dieting. So I said, one fear you have of losing the weight. And she's like, I don't have any fear of losing this weight. Like, trust me, I'm getting
I got it.
I don't think I have a block. I'm like, okay, but your results are telling me you have a block. So if you're not getting the results that you want, then that's a cue that something internally is blocking you. And so I said, get mindful. I said, I fear if I lose the weight then. And then she started tearing up. And she's like, I realize now that I would be attractive to a man, and she hadn't processed her divorce. And so she was avoiding by having the weight, avoiding actually doing some of the deeper work. She was from India, and she was outcast from her community because she got divorced. So there was a bunch in there. And she's like, well, if I have this weight, it's protecting me. And we don't think about it here. It's unconscious.
Right. That's really interesting. But yeah, it's how do you tap into that unconsciousness of, well, why aren't you doing something? And sometimes your why might not be that strong enough because you're like, I really want to lose weight, but I also want to go out and have a drink at the weekend and like eat a donut. So it's finding that difference between when you really want something and how do you uncover that unconsciously. And also when you might actually be content with your reaction. You don't really want to get super ripped up, but like you like the idea of it.
Yeah. And I think being honest with yourself, but also if you're consistently creating a pattern and you're not actually making the change, then you could just ask yourself, one fear I have of whatever your goal is, and then get mindful. You have your own insights, you have your own wisdom. So it's just about slowing down to actually help, because otherwise you're at war inside of yourself. I say I want to get ripped, and then another part of me is like, yeah, but I really like dancing, you know, and I really like going out and drinking all night and eating those donuts. So it's like, okay, what's the value in both of those? Okay, yes, I want to feel healthy and fit. I also like to have a good time. How can I have both of those so I don't think that they're opposing each other? So then it's like, okay, great. So I'm going to make sure I have a good time with my friends, and we'll go to SoulCycle. And we'll do these other things, ways to honor both of those values, so they're not unconsciously competing inside.
I think one of the big things that I spoke to you about, and I've spoken to a couple of people this year, is that having those two sides to you. And I've told my audience this, like sometimes I'm like the yogi that wants to just be with Mother Earth and be vegan and like lie on the earth. And then there's sometimes I want to get on a yacht, I want to spray champagne all over my body, and I want to go wild. And I'm like, am I lost? Like, who am I? And is that okay?
I love that. I love both of those parts of you, and I have both of those parts of me too. So it's like, I think part of it is we have these ideas of how we think we should be, and letting go of those boxes, and it actually opens you to accepting yourself exactly the way that you are. It's just if you're saying, I should be the yogi and I shouldn't be on the yacht, is where there's conflict. So when we start judging ourselves, that's actually when we're stuck with a habit or a behavior. And for you, I want to be on the yacht with you. I want to do the vegan yogi retreats. Like, yes to all of it. And actually my experience is when I say yes to all parts of myself, that's when I feel more aligned and true to myself. And I don't have these ideas that I shouldn't have both.
Right. And I think a lot of times I see on social media, people get so criticized when they're that yoga person and then they go and like have a drink or something. And it's also like the outside world giving you like what you should feel like. Honestly, up until this year when I started my podcast, I was the squeaky clean person on YouTube who did the videos and everything looked perfect. No one knew that, you know, I've drunk a lot, done other things I shouldn't have done, and, you know, went through a divorce. But like, I feel like just being authentically you, because if you're trying to be one person, as soon as you do start to do those other things, people are going to start to be like, well, that's not you. And you're like, well, it is actually, but like you've tried to have this perfect image of yourself for so long.
That's right. And my experience is life is a mirror. So if I'm not accepting a part of me, then I'm going to be triggered by other people not accepting it. When I own it, then I claim and I say, yes, I like the yacht, and I like the vegan yogi retreats. They're like, cool, she's comfortable with herself. I can accept that too. So I think a lot of the time people try to create change from the outside in, and really the easier way is to do it from the inside out. And the beautiful part of that is like, okay, I'm going to accept myself exactly as I am, that I like both of these parts of me, or I want to have all of it. Then you're either going to create the change that you want, or people aren't going to push back. Or if they do, you'll just be able to claim it and move on. It won't stick inside of you.
I love that. And I think that's a real big message that I've had this year is like, it's okay to do both. And it's actually exciting and it's good, and just like own that. You know, in my office, like we work super hard, and then 4th of July, we went all out, you know, and it's like, and then it's fun. It's like, you know, and then we know how to knuckle down and do some work. But I feel like, you know, you talk about burnout, and if I'm so in the zone of working out, like I start to lose my creative flow and I just need that like night of release. And then once I've had it, I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to get back to work. So sometimes that might help with burnout.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like burnout is much more of the masculine approach. And I feel like we've done that for so long where it's like, okay, focus, clear, intentional. I'm going at it, white knuckling a little bit. And there's sprints, there's times to do that, but we can't be like, we know with recovery, with working out, you have to like go full in with your sprint. And then the recovery is actually when you're building muscle and that's when you're rejuvenating yourself. So same thing with work. And it's like, yes, that feminine is like, oh, I can relax and I can let things come to me rather than needing to go towards it. And that dance between like really staying focused and getting at it and the other of like just letting it go and like that creative side of ourselves helps. You know, I heard this quantum physicist, I forgot his name, but he says, it's not just do. It's not just be. It's do.
Oh, I love that. It's so rad.
The dance of life. And then that's actually better for our health. And we go further in our businesses and in our goals.
Yeah. And I think that's true too. We have a big pendulum swing right now of a lot of the be. And you got to do the do to get the be.
That's right.
And if you really want a goal and there's like a deadline, it might be do until you get to that point of like that momentum. And then it's like the B part. And like, it's finding that balance, but also like if there's something that you're really going after or if you really want it, you have to know that you have to knuckle down in times, because sometimes, you know, a lot right now, it's like, oh, you know, it's okay to say no. What do you feel like when it's okay to say no and when you should actually show up? Because sometimes showing up helps.
This is fascinating because I work with a lot of women who are either deeply spiritually wise and do a lot of the being. And then another set of the women that I work with are very like good at achieving and doing. And so I bring them together to teach them that it's not just one or the other. And some can learn about really setting practical goals. Like there's the dabbler type who tries many different things, but doesn't really take one thing down to fruition. There's the spiritual one who's like, I'm just going to let it go and see what happens. And like,
it will come to me. I'm like, yeah. Not always.
Right. Yeah. And then there's the other who's like very type A, very committed, but totally disconnected from herself and her heart. And then just doing to prove her worth unconsciously. Right. So it's like, okay, we have to be mindful about ourselves and be honest. Where are we actually at? And what's the medicine we need in the moment? Because it's going to be different for everyone depending on what your programming is. Am I achieving so that then I feel good enough? Or am I being spiritual and like letting it come to me thinking like that's the highest path when really it's about ground. If you want to build a house, map out the plan and actually get to work and have some deadlines.
It's about both.
It's
about both too. So for you, when you're feeling burned out, how do you recognize that? Do you keep going for a bit? Do you stop? Are you like, what's your process?
I have boundaries.
Okay.
Boundaries. And also knowing what's valuable and important to me. Because we need to be able to say no to certain things. And also making sure that I know when I'm going to be sprinting and when I take time off. Like I just got back from Spain. I didn't hardly do much. I didn't really do any work when I was out there. And then I got back and now I'm in a sprint again. And so it's nice to kind of map out your bigger business model too, to know so you don't feel guilty for taking time off. Find a lot of people feel guilty. Like I should be doing more. They're doing more. And they unconsciously think that something's wrong with them if they're not, or that they're more valuable if they're busy. So doing some of the deeper unconscious programming work is helpful, but also just giving ourselves permission and mapping out a calendar that's really practical to be like, this is my time off. This is my recovery.
Yes.
And then I'm going to jump in September.
Just like you would with a workout.
That's right.
So how far out are you planned?
I have probably the next year planned out.
And then in that, you've got the recovery time.
Yes.
I love that. It's like building a training schedule. You know, like on our app, we do, 6 days, we've got a stretch day, and then we have a day off, It's planning it weekly, but yes, you actually have to do that in your life too.
And we have usually Sundays as a society, people try to take that time off, right? But as entrepreneurs, a lot of the time people push through the weekends to try to get caught up.
Yes.
But we don't think about, that's actually a path to burnout. That's not sustainable. That's fine for a sprint. But sometimes, suffering is intelligent. When we do burn out, it's just feedback that we need to try it a different way.
Right.
So I'm all about testing things out. We don't have to judge anything, but we can test it out and see what works for us.
Yeah. And so what do you do it for your rest days? You know, you're working super hard. Like, is that self-care? Is that going to the spa? Is that just doing nothing? Like, what do you like to do on your recovery?
Yeah, well, there's two things. I like to have rest days, but I also like to implement self-care throughout the week. So it's not just like burn out and then recover.
Yes.
It's also me doing mindset work. It's also me meditating. It's also me working with a healer or working with a coach. It's consistently as pillars in my lifestyle just because I value it. And I also see the value of working change at the mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. Working it at different levels actually helps me enjoy my life more.
Yeah.
And I go further as a result. So I have those pillars set in. Like every Friday, I'd have an hour from 10 to 11, I do mindset work with a partner. I have to get an accountability partner. Otherwise, my ego's like, you don't really need that. Or
Yeah. You got it. Yeah.
Or working out, really moving my body, getting out of my mind and dropping in and feeling present. I feel more energized working out. Meditation, even if it's simple, 10 minutes in the morning. And sometimes I go through waves of, doing silent retreats, and I'll go deep into it. And I go deep. Yeah, I love silence. But then also about, just having, sometimes I don't meditate. And then I realize actually my cues, I listened. So if I start really getting locked in my mind, then I'm like, oh, I need to meditate again because I know the value of it rather than like shaming myself or having another I need to do this.
Yeah.
I know the value of what my life looks like when I do prioritize it. And so I'm more drawn towards what feels good rather than away from what feels bad.
And also when you're filling your own cup up, you're actually a better human for other people, because if you haven't eaten, you're going to be mad. If you're like stressed, you haven't enough sleep, you're not a very nice person. Yeah. And so you're actually not very good, not much use when you haven't given yourself, when you're getting, I know when I'm getting like, when a messages come through and an emails come through and it's something that you get pissed off at, but you wouldn't normally, you're like, oh, hang on a second. I need to have a nap. I need to have a lie down. I need to have a cup of tea with a piece of chocolate. I just need to chill out.
Good.
Yeah. So I understand that too. I want to talk more about the silent retreats, because I don't know if many people know about silent retreats or how they work, and that fascinates me. So talk me through, how long are the silent retreats? Is there literally no talking?
Well, okay. So I guess it was in 2009, I just craved silence. I'd just gone through this huge awakening experience. I just wanted to be without my regular habits and patterns. I wanted to be contained in
What set that off?
It was just an internal, I was just an internal calling. I just wanted silence.
You don't remember the day or like
No,
what?
I remember Googling silent retreat. I happened to be going to India. I just graduated from a 2-year master's degree in spiritual psychology. And I was like, okay, Googling silent retreat. I heard.
Why silent retreat?
Because I wanted somebody to take care of the space for me to let go into. I just wanted to let go.
And you knew about silent retreats before, a little bit.
I had heard about them.
Right.
But I didn't know anyone that did them. And really a question for me, and one that had driven most of my life until I was about 20, was, who am I? I wanted to know who I was deeply. And so the silent retreat felt in support of that. And so I just Googled silent retreat, and I ended up in India at a Vipassana retreat. And that was...
And how old were you?
I was 20s, mid-20s.
Okay.
5. I forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was like boot camp for meditators, meaning like it's one style of meditation. It's not my style, but I'm glad that I had the container to drop in, and it's a really beautiful organization. It just wasn't my style.
Yeah.
So then I got back and I got kind of addicted. I'm addicted to growth. I love optimizing life. And I just felt like that was it was like the first time I could really let go. I don't know if you've had the experience of like, you may have those off days that you're still holding on, you're still cleaning around the house, but silent retreat, this teacher that I work with, his name's Shanti, and I would sit with him for maybe 5-day retreats a year. And I would just completely let go. And so the structure, because it sounds like you're interested in the structure.
Yes, I am really interested and fascinated, because it's not like my retreat that's coming up in like 3 weeks. To be very different. Yes.
So this retreat was, you do a 40-minute sitting of meditation in the morning. Then he would do a guided meditation. You would, you would have lunch, and then you do 3 hours of sitting. So like 40 minutes, 40 minutes, 40 minutes, you have breaks. Then he would do it's called a satsang. It's a talk in the evening. And he would talk, but you're trying to let your mind go or see what's beyond the mind.
Wow.
And
Are you not talking? So
I'm not talking the whole time.
The whole
only time
time.
you could talk
Yeah.
is if you ask him a question at that hour and a half period of time.
okay.
And then you meditate again, and that's it for 5 days.
So for 5 days, how many words do you think you said?
Many times I didn't ask him a question.
Mhm.
Every time, and this is my experience, every time
You're almost interested in what other people are saying?
I'm interested in watching the mind rather than being in the rabbit hole of thinking.
Mhm.
And as soon as I formulated my question, I knew the answer. So if anybody has a question inside right now and you can't figure it out, ask the question in the most simple, basic 3rd grade language and find out if life answers it. Find out if you hear your own wisdom on it. That's my experience.
Wow.
It happens often.
And when's your next one? When are you going again?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe in September.
And is this part of your recovery, or is this part of the work part? Is this the do or the be?
That was more the be. So
Yes.
for about 20 years, all I cared, maybe 25 years, 30 years, until I was about 30, all I cared about was being, knowing who I was and being. And then the pendulum swung. And then it was like, I really got who I was on a deeper level.
Yeah.
And then it was like, I wanted to just sink my teeth into life and do and create.
Yeah. You were so ready.
I was just
so ready to so maybe if you're not out there right now doing all the things, it's like find out who you are, do some more of the being, and then that's going to motivate you to do the do. Because I feel like if you don't really know why you're doing something or what who you even are, where is the motivation and the drive to do it?
Oftentimes it's fear.
Or you fall off track.
Yeah. So I would just say trust the intelligence of your own intuition and you're being pulled towards. So for me, it was a long time as around being around finding out who I am. And then the pendulum swung was around business. And I started hiring coaches and my life and my business blew up and everything changed. And now it's about integration.
Wow. Do you ever fall off track?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, all the time.
And what gets you back on track?
Knowing how, just having listening to my body, listening to what helps, and also just knowing how good I feel when I just come back to it.
Right.
So it's not I need to be back on track or I should be doing this. Because I think sometimes we think criticism works and we tell ourselves we should be doing something, but actually that gets us stuck in a pattern. And unconsciously we believe if I accept something, then I can't change it. But that couldn't be further from the truth. When you accept something, then you can actually change it. You're no longer pushing against, this is what's already happened. It's like, okay, this is what's happening. And what are my choices now? So you have all your power back by not resisting it.
Right.
So it's like, okay, so now what do I want to do? Okay, well, now I want to just dive into my business and to give ourselves permission for whatever phase or whatever season we're in our lives, while holding the bigger context for, am I tired or am I pushing and I'm not listening to my body? You know, really starting to listen deeply.
So do you feel like if you're falling off track, you should be or do? Or does that really just depends on where you're at?
I mean, I think if you want to go faster, slow down some of the inner work. So it's like, okay, where am I coming from? And then oftentimes it only takes a little bit of time. It could take a day. Recovery doesn't have to take a long time, but making sure it's in our schedule helps us be more present, more productive.
And how do you not make excuses for being in the be so much? Because sometimes we do have that other pendulum of well, I can't do this right now just because I'm finding myself, or I need to work on myself. And that's great. And sometimes when you do the do is when you find even more about what you like and what you don't like.
This is such a good, but we can have excuses for both. We can have excuses but I have so many deadlines and I have so much to do. And sometimes society rewards achievement so it can get hidden, where it's like what we're still doing and we're not resting. And then other times there's I just want to be, and that's also an excuse. So I think because it's even with, I'm thinking of eating, it's not bad to eat. It's just where you come from. Am I emotionally eating? And so of course it's about where you're coming from. Even with this, it's like being radically honest with yourself and giving ourselves permission to be where we are and not judge the process, but being honest, I think, is the key, because you can be or you can do, and both can be an excuse, and both can be actually the medicine.
Right. It's just being honest with what you want.
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, for a long time, I was healing. I got licensed as a psychotherapist. I have 2 master's degrees. I kept doing the healing work and the training, and I was unconsciously hiding behind taking action.
Okay, because you would just keep going to more.
Like, something's wrong with me, or
so you got more coaching, you went and got more degrees,
more degrees, and I went down that path, and then I was just like, enough. And I also had a deeper spiritual awakening where I was like, oh, I could see what I was doing, and I was really honest. Then I hired a coach. And then the pendulum swung, and then I went into doing and future orientation.
Yeah.
And then I kind of got lost in achievement and future doing and planning rather than being present. So again, it's about both and being honest about both and integrating and not having an idea like integration is the new ideal, right? Because it's not ideal depending on where we are in our life. A big part of my experience was the being was important first for me. And then the doing was important. It's like a stage of development. And now it feels like I'm exactly where I need to be. And I'm being mindful of integrating both. But I think if we judge ourselves or we criticize ourselves, that's where we get stuck.
Yeah, totally. It's having that balance and knowing that honesty. And, like sometimes like, I know my schedule. I do that too. My whole year is mapped out too. And I know that these are the times, I was in New York and then we went to Texas and it was like, go, like 4 or 5 hours of sleep. It was crazy. I had so much fun. And then the week after, I had like so much extra time on my hands. Yeah. But instead of getting mad, I was like, wow, this is my time to catch up and recover, because I was like, I was still catching up on sleep.
Yeah.
And it's not like I didn't do anything. I was just sitting around the house watching Netflix because I love to work and I love to create, but I was doing it at a slower pace. Yeah. I was really taking the time to design something or look at something and go through it. And then I was, I would read more books. I think that's the thing for me to be able to shut off is self-care, is reading books, because I enjoy it, but I also feel like I'm learning. Yeah. So it's like that. I kind of get that best of both worlds. I'm like, oh, I'm doing personal development. I'm learning stuff, but like, also I'm resting. Yeah. I feel like sometimes too, when we get off track, we have that motion of like feeling sad and sadness. And I saw one of your posts the other day that was like, talks about being sad. Yeah. And I think that's like such a huge emotion. Yeah. And it's so more powerful than being happy sometimes. Yes. And it's overtaking. Yeah. And we think it's us. We think we're just the one that's being sad. But how have you experienced sadness in your life?
So it's like sadness is energy. It's not who you are, and it's not a fact. And so actually neuroscientists have come to find that it only takes 90 seconds to feel an emotion in the body somatically before it moves through. So if you're feeling an emotion longer than 90 seconds, that means you're telling yourself a story about sadness rather than dropping in to the sensations in your body. And every time sadness is different. So it's like sadness could be, and I say here because it's usually in the core, but sadness, say it's in your core and you just breathe into the sensations, whatever those are, and just let them go and just get mindful without a story of what sadness is, but directly experiencing it with openness without identifying with it. It moves on. It's like a little kid. It just looked for a hug and then it's off playing again. And oftentimes we try to do our way beyond sadness. I don't want to feel this way and I'm going to live up here and I'm going to achieve, or I'm going to be prettier. I'm going to be whatever the thing is so that I don't feel these things. But ironically, we know now that if we open the range and stretch the range to feel the capacity of our feelings, the sadness opens us to more joy, right? And ironically, we feel more equipped with life and we're no longer trying to get away from life. We can say, I'm willing to take on anything because I know that that's not who I am. And it can't really touch the truth of who I am.
So it's taking that moment to inhale the sadness almost, acknowledge that it's there, breathe it out. That's right. And then, because you're allowed to feel it. Yeah. I think that's a thing. I've been in relationships with people when people have said, I don't understand that you feel like that. I don't understand why you're sad. I'm like, I don't really care. Like, this is how I feel. I can't like change it. Yeah. And I used to like have this conversation a lot. Like, I don't understand that you feel like that. And how do you deal with someone, because obviously you are a big relationships expert too. Like, how do you deal with someone who maybe in your relationship right now doesn't understand or doesn't even want to understand why you feel the way that you do and then discredit it?
So we can't try to understand feelings. Thoughts and feelings are a different dialect. So if we're thinking about our feelings, it's not going to be helpful. Right. And oftentimes the partner that says, I don't understand, isn't in touch with their emotional side. Right. And so oftentimes opposites attract, where one partner is more emotional and the other is more mental. And they're there to teach each other how to develop the undeveloped parts of themselves. So rather than getting stuck in blame or thinking I should be more mental, or I should be more fit, like emotional, it's like, how can they be my teacher to help me develop more of myself? And so some people avoid feelings. They try to think about them. They psychoanalyze. They don't actually feel them. Other people,
so they don't actually feel them?
Feel them. They're thinking about them. And they're talking to their friends about how they feel, but they're not actually feeling their feelings.
So it doesn't hurt.
And that's what makes it move on.
Wow. Okay. So some people can think it, but they don't actually
feel it.
Feel that sickness.
The sadness. And ironically, it only takes 90 seconds to feel it. So sadness, ironically, opens you to joy, to happiness when it's fully felt. You would have, it's the last place you would have looked. Am I willing to feel into sadness, feeling it as a sensation in the body, and find out for myself? So don't indulge it. So a lot of times, stereotypically, women can like hamster wheel and feel it and kind of indulge in the feelings by telling themselves a story or getting really curious or identified with it. And then a lot of other people will just think it. They'll avoid it. So don't indulge and don't avoid. Just allow the feelings to come up and out.
So when you're saying to someone, you don't understand how I feel, it's literally because they don't know how you feel because they don't have that uncomfortableness. Because when you feel sad, you feel sick.
Yeah.
You feel like you feel sad. You feel like a little bit, you feel sick and your body is actually physically changing.
Yeah.
And so some people don't actually have that ability to have that feeling.
They don't know how to be with their emotions.
Right. Okay. And can you teach someone to have that feeling?
100%. I think we know when we're kids, before we have ideas that sadness is bad, because ironically, when sadness is fully met, again, 90 seconds, it turns into happiness. It makes you feel lighter. That heaviness, when it's directly allowed and embraced without identifying with it, without indulging it, and without avoiding it, it turns into happiness. It's the alchemy. It's the last place people would look.
So do you feel that that's why a lot of men typically are not as feel the feelings? Because when they're a kid, if they fall over, their dad's like, get up, son. Yeah. Whereas like if a girl falls over, it's like, oh my goodness, like, are you okay? Are you okay?
Yeah. And sometimes little girls learn like, that's how I get attention. And then they wallow in it. And again, this is like very general.
So victim mentality a little bit.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Or using excuses or sometimes getting sick because that's the way I get attention. So it's all about the psychology of these habits that are completely unconscious until we bring more mindfulness to it. But we have to be aware with compassion. Otherwise, again, if you judge it, you're stuck with it.
Okay. So the best way to deal with either person, if someone's feeling sad and they're trying to express that to a partner, hey, I'm having these feelings, and they only think it, how do you describe what that feels like?
I would say first learn to, I used to be a couples therapist. So I'm a big fan of learning how to work through your own process, but I'm also a fan of your partner being a healing agent, a healing presence in your life.
Yeah.
So yes, and if you're usually attracted to somebody that's similar to your parent that you had most issues with, right? And so if you don't feel met, you're going to be attracted to somebody that's mirroring those same issues.
Is that because you're trying to get it from them?
You're trying to heal it. Unconsciously, you're trying to heal it.
And you're trying to get what you had from your parents from another person.
But we think what's familiar is safe. It's not.
Right.
And that can be true.
God, that's like so ironic because like my dad growing up was like, he would not really much recognition. My mom would like kick him under the table. She'd be like, tell Rebecca she did a good job at school. He'd be like, why are you kicking me under the table? And like Corey isn't the best at like recognition and telling me, oh my goodness, you were amazing. You did so great. And I love recognition. Like that's what makes me feel like the most special girl in the world. Yeah. But yeah, my dad is kind of like not that emotional, like, hugs here and there, but like, oh my God, this is just, and a lot of times people too, they do say I'm dating someone that's like my dad.
100%. Yeah. And it's unconsciously designed so that then you can heal it. So you're attracted to what's familiar because it seems safe, even if it's not. And then you mirror your childhood wound or whatever that missed experience was, so you can heal it. So you can either work it out with your partner.
Yep. Or find a new one.
Or no.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
That's great.
Oh, that's third option. That's like plan B all the way down. Yeah.
Okay, try these other ones first.
Yes, 100%. She's the expert.
Unless you're just clear in your intuition that this is no longer. But it's like we attract that so that then we can heal it. And so I'm a big fan of like going direct and being with that part of you from that earlier experience and telling her what she needed to hear, what that missing experience was. And actually, again, life's a mirror. So as you do that, your partner starts showing up and you start receiving it, or you start noticing the way that they show up.
Okay.
And you can receive it. Versus the other option would be if you're in a conscious partnership and you're aware of your patterns and you're willing to do the work, you can be that missing experience for each other. There's processes and tools to do it. There's a love quiz I have on my website where it essentially takes 15 minutes to do, but it will tell you what you're actually looking. You think you're attracted to tall, dark, and handsome, but really it's like emotionally unavailable.
Yeah.
So it'll show you what the wounds are and then what you value in relationship. But most importantly, how do you block receiving the love that you really want? Because there's a lot of the time, like people are showing appreciation.
Yes.
And we may not be seeing it.
Yes.
And so how do we block that? And then therefore, once you're aware of it, then you can test out other ways of being so you can really feel nourished.
It's having that the love language too, like having that open conversation. Like Corey's always like, well, I make your shake every day. I'm like, that doesn't do anything for me because I can make my own shake, but I can't tell myself that you did a great job on stage or you did this, you know?
But you can.
Yes.
And you can to that part of you that had that missed experience.
Yes.
You can actually learn to be like,
So not seeking it from other people.
I think yes and. We're human. We have needs.
Yes.
So, but if our partner isn't present and available to help recover and help us meet our needs, how do we learn to self-soothe? How do we learn to really take care of ourselves? And oftentimes because
then you're not healing, really. You're just trying to find validation in somebody else, and then they're doing the work for you, and then you really...
And then you're dependent.
Yes.
And there's a lot of weird manipulation if you think it's only from them. So a more empowered love is to also learn to give yourself that love, those parts of you, and then you can also receive it more easily from your partner. So I'm a big fan of yes and. There's some schools of thought where it's like, you're 100%, it's your responsibility. Other schools of thought say, work it out in your partnership. And I say yes and.
Yeah.
It's to both.
Bit of both. Yeah. It is your responsibility, and it's also your responsibility to work with your partner. So yeah I love that.
Yeah.
All right. Lastly, I want to touch on anxiety, because I feel like that kind of goes through into sadness, because sometimes when you get sad, if you don't allow the 90 seconds to breathe through, those 90 seconds can turn into 9 minutes, it can turn into 90 minutes, and then you've got 9 days to 90 days, and all of a sudden you are caught up in this, this tension. Have you suffered with anxiety before?
Absolutely. I would say anytime I'm moving outside my comfort zone, I can feel anxiety creep up in my body. And anxiety tells me that I'm believing something in the future that's fear-based.
Right.
So it's just feedback, and I have to work it on a mental level. So mentally and physically, so somatically, meaning, yes, same principles apply with sadness as they do with anxiety, as they do with many feelings that we've been avoiding. How do I actually embrace them and experience what they are rather than what I label, what I think that they are? So I breathe into it, I allow it. Ironically, I'm more peaceful, I'm more grounded, and then I can be strategic and innovative with my business and being present with whatever I'm wanting in my relationships. So anxiety, 2 ways that I work it, will first feel it somatically in the body, just like you would with your sadness or whatever the feeling is. Breathe into it, allow it. And then you just find out what was the story I was telling myself that created it, and question the story. And the beautiful part of that is, like, the more you're willing to put into this type of work, the inner work, the less those patterns are developed in you, and they're not the go-to stories that you live out of unconsciously, and you just feel better overall. So you change it with this, and then it changes with health, it changes with relationships, business.
Right. And it's recognizing what that trigger was. And sometimes you might feel anxious, like when you're going through and working on yourself. This was for me. I would have anxiety, and it would last a couple of days or a couple of weeks. And I had to work on myself so that it was a couple of days, and then more work. So it's a couple of hours, and then it goes a couple of minutes. But if you never work on yourself and really, because no one else someone can sit down with you and teach you things to do, but until you implement them, that's the big thing. Is I hear so many people listening to podcasts, listening to personal development, they go to Tony Robbins and Grant Cardone, and you think if you pay somebody or you pay a coach to do something and to teach you, you've done it. But it's not that transaction of money. It's actually when you listen to it and you go away and you implement what it is.
100%. And I like small daily things. I think those can change our life. So if you are listening and you just just don't ever feel your feelings, maybe for today, just chunk it down today. What would it be like just to, before I go to bed or just right now, stop and just breathe into the thing that I feel uncomfortable with and find out what's actually true. And then if that worked for you, okay, let's do it this week. And then let's just every night have a specific grounded habit that you create. And then my experience, I remember when I was diving into this work, it was like, does this stuff ever end? Like, is it always going to be there?
Is it always growth?
I was really, and I love growth, but it was like the healing and the anxiety and all the other gunky stuff. So it was like, does it really ever end? And my experience is yes. My experience is there's a reservoir of unexpressed emotion that we've been avoiding by achieving our way or thinking our way. And as we start to think of a teapot, as we start to take off the lid, that pressure gets released. And then you're just dealing with the current situation rather than like 10 years of unexpressed anxiety. And it just makes you feel lighter and more happy, ironically, by feeling these things.
Yeah, it's just taking that time to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And that anxiety, you have to want to make a change.
Yeah.
You have to want to implement it. And you have to know that it's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen. Like you said, like it's going to happen. You can, come over these challenges and you can get through anxiety. You can get through sadness if you're committed to the process.
That's right. And we're not born with these things. These are learned things.
Right.
We learned an inaccurate way, ineffective things. Again, like thinking that inner criticism works. It doesn't. So we can be compassionate with the critic. I remember at one point I had done a nightly process called self-forgiveness. And I started changing my inner narrative with my critic. I was compassionate with the critic. It was like, oh, the critic wants to make sure I'm doing my best. And it does that in an ineffective way by judging me, but I'm not going to judge the critic, which is just another layer of criticism. So I'm going to acknowledge like, oh, you're the part of me that wants to make sure that I'm doing my best. You have an ineffective, outdated model of criticizing me to do it, but I can see where you're coming from. So thank you. And then I just kept going in my day.
It's positive feedback. And sometimes even when we get it, if you've made a video or you've done something and like someone sends you some feedback, it doesn't always feel that great. But really deep down, you're like, well, I have two options. I can like let my ego just like get annoyed by it, or I can utilize this. I've got free feedback, which everybody needs feedback to make something even better.
Yeah. And so criticism internally or externally, same thing applies. If I resist it, I get defensive and it hurts more. Where I'm like, if I say, oh, thank you for the feedback internally or externally, thanks for your feedback, then I can incorporate it and I don't hurt so much.
Yeah.
But my experience is that my critic lightened. Like I don't have the same type of gripping, paralyzing criticism I used to have.
Because you're looking at it from a different way?
That's right. But repetitively over time. So then I started having compassion for the critic, compassion for myself, knowing I was doing the best, and then it translates to somebody else. And that kindness operating system actually kicked on.
Because you're almost excited then to get the feedback because you're like, show me how to make this better. Show me how to be even better. Rather than like, you're doing this wrong. And if you change it, it's like, hey, you're doing great. And if you did this, it would be X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
The first thing though is like, if some part of you, if you're hearing this and you're like, some part of you gets paralyzed with negative feedback, just like breathe into that sensation. Let that part of you know what she needs or what he needs to hear directly inside. And then, okay, what's the value? What can I take from this so I can use it to grow me, to improve my performance, knowing my performance is separate than who I am. Then it's actually much easier. Then it's just feedback about how you did, not who you are.
Right.
It's
the action. The people aren't criticizing you as a person. It's the action. And if you want to give criticism to someone or feedback, ask first. Hey, I have some feedback for you. Would you like to hear it? Because sometimes people might not be in the right space to hear it. And then they're actually going to take it in a better way when you've said, hey, I would like that feedback. I would like the criticism. And then they're in a space to actually receive it.
And they may or may not be. But then you still can learn tools to navigate that.
Yes. How can you say yes regardless?
And or to just even saying no sometimes and then being tender, like being gentle with the part of you that does care how people think of you. Because that's completely human too.
And you might not just be ready at that moment to receive it. And be like, hey, I appreciate that you have feedback. Maybe tomorrow would be a better day. Or like, because sometimes if you've had one of those days, you're like, I don't need one more thing. Like I get it.
And
like
that's self-love in action.
Yes, and that's like, hey, no, there's my stop, there's my no, but I still want to hear it because you don't want to just leave that on the table.
Yes.
It's like, okay, today is not the right day for this because I've had a million shitty things happen today. I don't need one more, and I'm going to be ready for it. Better to receive it in a way tomorrow.
Yeah, 100%.
Love this. Well, what have you got coming up? You've already got the whole year planned. So where do people get involved with you, find out what you're doing? I know you've got masterminds and events, but like plug all your things. Like tell us where we can find you and what you're up to.
Thank you. You can find me at alyssanobriga.com. And actually on the freebies tab, there is a guide to getting unstuck if you want support, just an audio guide and a workbook. Or there's a really powerful love quiz if you want to dive deeper into relationships.
I'm going to be doing that, sure.
It's really good. It's pretty powerful. It takes about 15 minutes, but all free, all ways to support you and your audience.
And then you have an event and a mastermind.
Yes. So I have an event coming up September 7th and 8th, and this is co-partnered with Boss Babe. And this is for women who really want to go to their next level in their business. And we have a leadership program in October. It's a 6-month leadership program. All the things on the website. And really, it's just about doing the transformational work so that you learn the life hack tools and skills to optimize yourself, but also your business, as well as strategy and connecting and just having fun with other women.
It's just amazing to be around. Like if you just need some calming things, but like get centered and also like get shit done, like you're incredible. So thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of It Takes Grit. If you loved it, which of course you did, head on over to iTunes and Spotify and leave us a lovely review. And of course you can check us out on the It Takes Grit podcast on Instagram. Have a wonderful rest of your day and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.